So we were discussing about the characteristic polynomial and the eigenvalue problem. We noticed that before we can use the design spectrum for seismic analysis or for estimating the forces due to earthquakes in structural system or structural members, we need to have an idea of the natural period of the structure, because that is what will govern the which value of the response spectrum to take for seismic analysis, for estimating the maximum response due to earthquake. And the problem of finding out natural frequency or natural period boils down to finding out finding answer to the hypothetical question, does the system admit synchronous simple harmonic motion, right? And since the damping is generally very small, so we ignore it from our consideration and make our life much simpler. Including damping in the eigenvalue problem makes life exponentially much more difficult. You will realize when you try to do that. So it's much better option to leave out the damping from consideration, as long as damping amplitudes are very small in comparison to other two terms of the equation of motion. And then we carry out free vibration analysis. Free vibration, that means system is disturbed from its initial condition, initial state of rest, and subsequently it is allowed to vibrate on its own without any external force acting on it, and therefore the right hand side is 0. Right? So this is an homogeneous equation, differential equation, which represents the free vibration of undamped system. We remove the damping part, and then we assume this form that the system has to execute simple harmonic motion. So every point of the system, every degree of freedom of the system moves by the same frequency omega, and simple harmonic motion, so it has to be either sine function or cosine function, it has to be harmonic. And then the amplitude at different points, different degrees of freedom, they can vary. They need not be identical. So the amplitudes can vary, but they have to be in sync. They have to be synchronous and execute harmonic motion, simple harmonic motion with the same frequency. So this is the functional form. So this is amplitude. Variation of amplitude with respect to degree of freedom is allowed. So different elements of this vector can have different values, but all of them will vary, will have the same dependence, same variation with respect to time. So that's the simple harmonic motion of single frequency, synchronous simple harmonic motion. And when we impose this condition, so this is the displacement, so acceleration is obviously going to be minus omega squared times this, and that's what you end up with this equation. And the equality has to prevail at all instants of time, so sine omega t cannot be identically 0 for any arbitrary combination of omega and t. And similarly, the vector, amplitude vector, cannot be null vector, because that null vector signifies at rest solution, so it is not a vibration at all. So that is also not possible. So the only way this equation can hold is when this entire entity is 0, and that is only possible when this coefficient matrix becomes singular, right? And what is the at what points it will become singular? The only thing that can change here is omega. M is constant, K is constant for a system. So stiffness properties are constant, mass is constant, the only thing that can change is omega. So this matrix will become singular at a few specific values of omega, and those are called the characteristic values or eigenvalues, right? And those for n by n system, this will lead to determinant of this matrix has to be 0. That's the condition for singularity, and this is what is known as eigenvalue problem. this determinant is an nth degree polynomial in omega square, and obviously it will have n number of roots for omega square, and a positive square root of these eigenvalues correspond to the natural frequencies of the system, and that actually the answer to that hypothetical question, that whether the system admits synchronous simple harmonic motion, is that yes, system does admit synchronous simple harmonic motion, but only at a few specific frequencies, and those are called natural frequencies, right? And once we have the natural frequencies, obviously natural period is proportional to the inverse of that, and using that we can at least compute, at least have an idea about what value from the design spectrum has to be picked. But that is still that still leaves open the question what to do with the values. So the problem that we have now is natural periods are, or I can say frequencies are known from solution of free vibration. Right? So we can get maybe omega n is a set of omega 1, omega 2, and so on. Right? So these are the natural frequencies. So what does your design spectrum look like? I will just use pseudo spectral acceleration, or let it be SPA in terms of G, and this is in seconds. So this will probably look something like this, right? So you can have your fundamental period T1 here, not really. So this will have T1, T2, T3, T4, and so on. So fundamental period will be longer because we arrange frequencies in the ascending order, sorted in ascending order. So the lowest frequency, smallest frequency, corresponds to the fundamental mode of vibration. So that mode, when we call mode of vibration, that refers to the amplitude shape. What is the that vector phi that we had earlier? This vector phi. So this is the for whatever frequency we find the root of the this characteristic polynomial. For that root, there will correspond a particular shape, phi, right? And that will be that solution will be referred to, is known as the mode shape corresponding to that particular natural frequency. Now obviously once you do this, this sounds like a simultaneous equation. Matrix, square matrix multiplied by a vector is equal to a right hand side vector, that is 0. But obviously you cannot solve this using simultaneous equation solvers, because this matrix is singular. Omega has been computed so as to render this coefficient matrix as singular. So a singular matrix will admit infinite solutions, right? There is no unique solution. So the only way to solve this problem is by imposing certain constraint and then find out one particular solution subject to that constraint. So there are several ways of imposing the constraints, and we will discuss some of the techniques to solve this problem, right? So this particular vector associated with one particular root is known as the eigenvector or the mode shape corresponding to that natural frequency, right? So now, so fundamental mode corresponds to the lowest frequency, and for lowest natural frequency, if I invert it, so that corresponds to the largest value of the natural period. So fundamental mode natural period is going to be the largest, and then next mode relatively higher frequency, the second mode period is going to be somewhat less than the fundamental mode period, and so on. So you can figure out what is the value from the spectrum that you can pick. So what is the value of from the spectrum that you can pick for your calculations? Similarly for T3, right? So now, and this is for a specific value of zeta, right? We assume that the damping ratio in all modes is identical. More on that later. So now we have spectral acceleration. Pseudospectral acceleration. So I can say SPA at T1 zeta, SPA at T2 zeta, SPA at T3 zeta, and so on. So these are the values that I can read from the design spectrum. So what do I do with these? How does that help me in finding out the response? The governing differential equation is still m v double dot plus c v dot k v is equal to minus m r u g double dot. Right? So that is the governing differential equation. How do I make use of these spectral values, design spectrum values, to find out what is the maximum response? My maximum response could be interstory drift, or it could be base shear, maximum base shear, or it could be maximum overturning moment at the base moment, and so on, right? Whatever value that I may need to compute. So the question now is to transform this, it is not very obvious how these values will be used to find out the maximum response of this multi-degree freedom system. So the task now is to transform this equation in such a form that this information that is available to us can be used somehow, right? And for that we make use of transform equations of motion into modal space. Now, what is modal space? I'm sure you must have had some exposure of vector spaces in numerical methods course. Are you familiar with the concept of vector spaces?
Sir, not that much.
Okay. How much are you familiar with? What do you know about vector spaces? What do you understand by the term vector spaces? You are familiar with the concept of vectors, isn't it? And the Cartesian coordinate system. And you also must be familiar with the concept of unit vectors. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So, what is the purpose of unit vectors?
To show direction.
Okay, so am I right in saying that any arbitrary vector can be resolved as a linear combination of unit vectors?
Yes, sir.
So, any vector,
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes.
any arbitrary vector can be written as a x times I plus y times j plus z times k in three-dimensional space, isn't it? That's something all of you have done. So let me draw this for two-dimensional system. I can draw this system as so this position, point P, has coordinates xy. It is designated by coordinates xy and it has a position vector r, right? So that is what you call projection, and the unit vector is I here and unit vector is j here. So this projection, you can say R vector is given by two components. It's a two-dimensional vector. So there are two dimensions to this, and the elements are x, y with reference to the basis vectors I and j. So I can write this as x times unit vector I plus y times unit vector j, and it becomes much easier to understand if I say unit vector I is denoted by unit component along x direction and 0 component along y direction, and unit vector j is defined as 0 component along x direction and unit component along y direction, right? So now you can see that it's very easily, very nicely fits in with the description, right? So this is what is known as two-dimensional Euclidean vector space, and we can this is a linear vector space in the sense that linear operations linearity holds, all the operations are closed, addition, subtraction is closed, and any addition of two vectors is also a member of the same vector space. Any subtraction of two vectors is also a member of the same vector space, lies in the same vector space, right? So the idea is you need to have, or you can have two, if it is a two-dimensional vector, then these two unit vectors are sufficient to resolve any arbitrary position. This position vector can be anywhere. You can represent it in terms of as a linear combination, as a weighted sum of these two unit vectors. Now this is, as you are all aware, point may be fixed, but our frame of reference keeps on changing. It is arbitrary. I may choose to orient x and y along this direction, right? So choice of basis vectors is actually, there can be an infinite set of vectors which can serve as the basis, right? The same vector can be resolved, uniquely resolved in terms of these two components, right? So R can be resolved along this direction and another component along perpendicular to this. So that is also possible. So the point is, there are infinite sets of vectors which can be used as a basis vectors. Basis vectors are those vectors in terms of which we can represent any arbitrary vector in the vector space, right? So this concept is very fundamental, and I am sure Ashwin must be discussing this in numerical methods course, without which you will not be able to follow most of the developments in the iterative solvers, iterative solution of simultaneous equations, right? The concept of vector space is absolutely essential to understand why do the iterative solution of simultaneous equation works, why do the methods work, and why do some methods converge faster and some methods take longer time to converge. So unless you understand this concept of vector spaces, it is very difficult to appreciate those finer details. So I would urge you to go through the vector space discussion, carefully, and understand that. Why I am bringing this into the discussion for seismic analysis is this transformation of equations. So this is essentially, I try to transform the variable into another variable q. So this variable v, I transform it to another set of variables q through this transformation matrix, right? So this is a linear transformation. So this is a some transformation matrix which relates, again this is n by 1, this is n by 1, and this is transformed by using an n by n matrix, right? So this is a linear transformation. The importance of this is, this matrix transformation matrix is modal matrix or mode shape matrix. What is this? This matrix, the columns of this modal matrix are these vectors phi. Each column of that matrix Y is one such vector phi which is associated with individual natural frequency omega. So there would be one vector phi 1 which would correspond to omega 1, there would be another vector phi 2 which would correspond to omega 2, and so on, right? Now please remember, I told you that phi cannot be determined uniquely, they can only be determined within a constant of proportionality, right? And that's why it is called mode shape matrix. If you remember, recall the word, I am referring to this as a mode shape. I can only I can only estimate the shape, I cannot prescribe any specific value. So whatever works for one vector which is a mode shape, everything that I do with that is also holds good for some constant multiple of that vector as well. So if phi is one of the vectors, one of the mode shape vectors, then alpha times phi is also a valid mode shape vector, right? So once I do that, then this equation, entire set of equation, phi is of course it's a constant number, matrix or vector of some numerical coefficient, so obviously it doesn't change with time. So any time dependence in V has to be absorbed in time dependence of Q. So when I transform this equation, substitute this, then entire equation becomes gets transformed to this another set of equations Q, right? So what is the big deal in that? So let's do that. Right? So I have just made this substitution, V is equal to phi times Q in this governing equation, governing differential equation of the system, and I have got this equation in terms of Q. So instead of variable V, we have some other variable Q, which is I call this, this V was defined in terms of Euclidean vector space, and this vector Q, unknown vector of unknowns Q, is now in a mathematical construct, abstract vector space, which is known as the modal space, modal vector space, because these two are related by this linear transformation matrix, that is the mode shape matrix. So what is done is, this is of course we just made this transformation, so a linear transformation, so identity holds, and the same thing works if I choose to multiply both sides by transpose of this matrix phi. Right? Now the interesting thing, why do we do this, is uh, we rely upon the properties of these mode shape vectors. These mode shape vectors are very interesting vectors in the sense that okay, so before I get into this, do you understand the concept of orthogonality? Orthogonality of vectors? I mean, what is the dot product of I and j?
0.
It is 0, and that is what is known as the orthogonality. है ना? So this is the condition of orthogonality, that it means that I has no component, no projection along j, j has no projection along I. So they are orthogonal to each other, and that is what is referred to as if I multiply this dot product in vector terms, refers to as this is what it is going to be. So this is 0. So 1 times 0, 0 times 1 plus 0 times 1 is equal to 0. So that is the orthogonality. So similarly, I mean, just as this for Euclidean unit vectors, the modal spaces, the basis of these modal spaces, which are the mode shapes that we determine as a solution of eigenvalue problem, they have this interesting property that they are orthogonal to each other, just as these I and j vectors are orthogonal to each other. They are also orthogonal to each other, but not directly to each other, but with respect to these system matrices M and K. So phi transpose phi is not going to be 0, right? Or some other if I take dot product of I with itself, then it will be unity. If I take dot product of I with j, it will be 0, and so on. So if I take phi 1 first column vector with phi 1, it will not be 0, but if I take it with respect to the mass and stiffness matrix, then this is going to be orthogonal. So phi is orthogonal with respect to the vectors which are defined as k times phi. Phi is going to be orthogonal with respect to a vector which is defined as m phi. So the idea is, by doing this operation, I decouple this system of equations, these coefficients, these matrices. This is again n by n. These reduce to diagonal terms. I will not talk about and this I can just continue with that. Right? And I can assume, since C is very small and there are several not much happening in with respect to the damping matrix, I can also assume that just as these are diagonalized by these undamped mode shaped matrices, this term also gets diagonalized, and I can write this as Ck right. So what does this look like? Each of these rows is independent, isn't it? We have one set of equations for Q1, we have another set of equations Q2, we have another set of equations Q3, and so on, and none of the terms affect any other terms. Equation for Q1, first row contains terms only related to Q1. Second row contains terms only related to Q2. So the unknowns Q1 and Q2, they do not influence each other, which is very different from what we had in the original differential equation. All this entire differential equation was coupled. So it was every row would have effect on every other row. Every variable would have influence on every other row of the equation, right? But not so in this form. So Q1, equation for Q1 is completely independent. I can write this as, let me just say M1 Q1 double dot plus C1 Q1 dot plus K1 Q1 is equal to minus phi 1 transpose M R UG double dot, right? Or I can just say generic term for all k is equal to 1, 2 up to n. Right? So what are these coefficients? Mk is equal to phi. So this is the kth column of matrix phi, or the kth eigenvector associated with omega k, and mass matrix M. Okay, not capital K. Okay, this K is causing confusion, so let me just replace this subscript with L. right? So this is, of course, if you look at it, this is 1 by n, it's a transpose of a column vector, mass matrix is n by n, and this is of course n by 1. So the product is going to be a scalar 1 by 1, so that's a constant value. Similarly, this is also going to be a constant value, and so on. So this I can, if I divide this whole by ml, then I get this equation as where I define twice zeta L omega L as CL by ml, omega L square as KL by ml, and gamma L as the ratio of two vectors, two scalars, phi L transpose M R divided by ml. This is known as mode participation factor. So this is a constant. So now you look at it, we have been able to transform this multi-degree freedom system into a set of scalar single equations. Now each of these equations for different values of L. So these are in terms of what we call as modal coordinates. Why do we call these as modal coordinates? In just as we call xy, what do you call xy for any position point P? What are these coefficients x and y are referred to as? What do you call them?
Coordinates.
These are Cartesian coordinates, right? So these are the Cartesian coordinates, which are what function do they use? They scale respective Cartesian base vectors, and so that their combination adds up to the position vector, right? So the point in space is defined by a position vector, and the coordinates of this point, they refer to the scaling factors of the respective base vectors in that vector space. So in this particular case, Cartesian coordinates x and y scale the Euclidean base vectors I and j, right? That's how they are called Cartesian coordinates. In this case, we call them as modal coordinates because they scale the mode shape vectors. If I rewrite this equation, so this is actually equal to sigma L is equal to 1 to n QL. So exactly same thing as this. So replace I with phi L and QL with the either of these coefficients coordinates x and y. So these are the weighting coefficients for these modal vectors or the eigenvectors associated with each mode of vibration, and their combination, they add up in this proportion to make up this vector that we wish to expand, right? So that's why since mode shape vectors are taken as the basis of the vector space, so the coordinates or the scaling coefficients of those associated with those vectors, base vectors, they are referred to as the modal coordinates. So these are the modal coordinates. So we have transformed the equation from Euclidean coordinate system or Cartesian coordinate system to modal coordinates. And in terms of these modal coordinates, this coupled equation becomes a set of uncoupled equations. So each equation, each equation is independent in its own right. So if I wish to find out, can I find now maximum value of QL? Can you give me an idea? If I wish to find out what is the maximum value of QL, can I find it given this spectrum? What is this spectrum? Do you remember what is this spectrum?
Sir, hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, this is the response response due to single degree of freedom system we have plotted as a spectral acceleration displacement multiplied by omega n का whole square.
Yes. So this spectrum gives you the maximum response of any single degree freedom system, whatever its natural period may be. So for different natural period, you have this maximum response for this excitation UG double dot, isn't it? So this is the equation that you solve. Let me just give you U double dot plus twice zeta n omega n U dot plus omega n squared U is equal to minus UG double dot. This is the equation that you solve for different values of omega n, right? And whatever is the maximum value that you use to figure out what is the this value going to be. So U max multiplied by omega n squared, that gives you this pseudo spectral acceleration. So that is what you have plotted. So the point here is, you know what is the value of maximum response of the system which is subjected to this excitation UG double dot, isn't it? This spectrum tells you, gives you, if you know the natural period, it gives you the maximum response of this system, this equation, when it is when the excitation is UG double dot. Now compare with what you have here. You have excitation which is proportional to UG double dot. It is a constant scale, right? So early you have what is the maximum response, that is given by minus UG double dot, that is the excitation that you have already found this equation solution as that is given to you as a response spectrum. So now you need to find out what is the maximum for excitation which is a scaled value. So instead of UG double dot, you need to find out what is going to be this maximum response for gamma times UG double dot. So obviously this is a linear system, so response is also going to scale linearly. So if I have this spectral displacement known to me, then I just multiply it by the scaling factor gamma L, right, and I have this QL max already known. So that gives us the idea modal response maxima can be found as Q1 max as spectral displacement corresponding to T1 and whatever is zeta 1 multiplied by gamma 1. Q2 max is equal to gamma 2 multiplied by spectral displacement T2 zeta, and so on. Right? So I compute the response, and that's all. So I have been able to find what is the maximum of the modal response in the modal space. Now all that I need to do is, this doesn't help me in any engineering calculation because I don't know what this modal response correspond to. So I need to, in order to make sense to the physical quantity, I need to transform it back to the corresponding physical space or Euclidean space using the same coordinate transformation Q, right? So now this is, of course, if I tell you this is going to be phi 1 times Q1 plus phi 2 times Q2 plus right. So I can find out what is the maximum by suitably substituting the maxima of Q1, Q2, Q3. Right, now I can make this little more explicit that Q1, Q2, Q3, Qn, they are all time dependent. Now the problem here is, because the response, it's a dynamic system, so there is no guarantee and it is highly unlikely that maxima of Q1 will happen exactly at the same instant of time as the maxima of Q2, and that will happen exactly at the same instant of time that Q3 has a maxima, and so on. So the point is, if I replace this summation, right, so does this entail V max is equal to phi times Q max? So this is linear transformation that is exact, right? This is by the assumption that V, a vector V, is related to another vector Q through this transformation matrix. But when I, at each instant of time, this transformation holds for each instant of time, for T1, T2, T3 and so on, right? But I cannot extend this to the maxima value of maxima, because these maxima, they occur at different instants of time. So Q1 max will happen at some time T1, Q2 max will happen at some other time T2, Q3 max will happen at some other time T3 and so on. So I cannot combine this as extend this to represent this linear combination of the absolute maxima. That would be obviously the most conservative estimate, and sometimes that is way too conservative than what is warranted. So this is what we call as modal combination rule. How do I mean, this is fine, we can find out what is the maximum value of modal coordinates, but then how do we combine these modal maxima to find out what is the appropriate response maxima? That is what we call as modal combination rules. So we will discuss about this modal combination rule for estimating response maxima. We will defer this discussion. For the time being, I will return to the eigenvalue problem. We will spend some time discussing eigenvalue problem, finding solution, because as you can see from this entire discussion, the mode shaped matrix or the modal matrix is a very, very crucial piece of information that we need. So we need to understand the eigenvalue problem and the properties of eigenvector very, very thoroughly, and so that we do not make any mistakes while computing the dynamic response and maximum response estimation. And then we will come again to this problem of combining modal response maxima to find out the system maximum response, structural response, maximum structural response to the earthquake excitation. So I will stop here. Any questions?